Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh to some of you and peace out to the rest of you. Black Artist Hana Black and again asking you to hit that share button. If you hit like or subscribe, thank you, but the share button is more important because the message is more important than the messenger. Some of you guys who are old, especially in conscious and spiritual circles, were doing something similar to SYSBM, but you were doing it in a pro-black manner. And there actually is a pro-black way to carry out SYSBM if you choose it. And that's the only way I know. But some of you in these pro-black spiritual and religious circles were already carrying out a pro-black type SYSBM. But it was pro-black in the short term and not the long term. And this is long before the acronym. Many brothers who are even Orthodox Muslim and of other strains of pro-blackness took a good example, which is Muhammad ibn Abdullah, peace be to him. And you used him to tell other black men who were conscious and had a conscience that they should marry single moms. And some of you started going abroad and then coming back and telling us that we should marry single moms from the third world countries and rescue them. And the ones of you who are religious were able to use Muhammad ibn Abdullah. There's an example of a man who married a widow with kids who was older than him. And you misconstrued things not just a bit, but a lot. And that is that because, see, in his situation, he was younger, but some hadiths say he was 3 years younger and not 15. Other hadiths say she was 15 years older than him. But in any case, he was younger, which means that in actuality, in her society, this was not encouraged. Yeah, she did have kids, that's true. But you know what? She was getting marriage proposals from other men who were wealthy like her, and she was wealthy. She was a wealthy woman who was older than him. And she went against the grain to marry a man who was not only younger than her, but did not have money, and he was an orphan. Noble lineage, but he was an orphan. And then she went to him through her cousin to propose to him, and he was not a prophet at the time, so there was no prohibition on drinking that had been revealed. She, according to some hadiths, she even got her father intoxicated so that he would not oppose the marriage. So she went and did exactly, if she is an example for women, I'm talking to you old walis that are looking for husbands for these sisters mostly. And some of you other not quite Muslim, but otherwise spiritual, conscientious pro-black men who want single mothers to have a place to go and who want role models for these kids. I'm talking mostly to you guys. You've taken a situation and you have turned around and you have allowed people to select what they're going to take from it. Or actually, you selected what you'll take from it and what you will propose to others and promote. So what she did was she went against hypergamy in every way. And she went and sent a proposal to him. And she was going after him because she liked him. I'm sure he was attractive enough for her visually, and because his character was solid. He had the character of a prophet before he was a prophet. Do you understand now? He had the character of a prophet before he was a prophet, and that was enough for her with her wealth to propose marriage to him, and she married him. And she supported him after his prophecy when everybody else was against them and died. She was actually an example for women, and if you were to hold up this example to most women today, they would balk and say, I'm not doing that. And I know, because most men today would look at the examples of just the Sahaba, the companions of Muhammad, not even of the prophets, but their companions, and they would say, we ain't doing all of that. And in many cases, we don't have to. We're not tried and tested with these same things. But where men will stop and they will say, you know what? We could not go through all of this, and we're not going to pretend we can. You've got sisters holding up these examples to us men, and then when you hold the examples up of women, they want to balk. They're not going to deal with that. But you have to be, again, like the Sahaba. Again, you must be something super in order to qualify for them in a very average or even mediocre and below average state. Now today, there are younger guys in their 20s, especially among the Muslims, trying to find good wives, and they are not previously married, and many are virgins. And you're telling them that what they should do is go abroad to a third world nation at that, find some divorcee, marry her, and rescue her from her hardships. And in some cases, you're even saying that they should go and find some single mother who was never even married to begin with, and marry her and rescue her from her hardships. My question is this: do you marry a woman because the two of you love each other, or because she needs a rescue? If you can marry a woman for the second reason, then with gender equality, which many of you will also promote, then she can marry a man who needs rescuing too, if she can rescue him, like what Khadijah financially would be credited for doing with Muhammad. Peace be to him. Some of you old guys only recommend women in some kind of distress to men who aren't in distress, and then you want to promote such marriages to these men. These kinds of marriages do have a practical value, but these are good as second and third and fourth wives. It is an insult to take these young brothers, especially when they're virgins, let alone, unmarried before, but especially when they're virgins. They've been chaste when they weren't married. And then say to them, well, brother, you should marry this woman over here because she's in this kind of situation. And I'm seeing this a lot with the Muslims. And I know because, look, when I was getting ready to meet my ex in North Africa, a friend of mine from Atlanta texted me about a white Muslima who had just had an infant baby and was being left by her Emirati husband. And I was like, I'm going to pass. Well, this would help you with your racism. It was all about what I could do for her. And that was his mindset. But see, he was happy with his wife. I had already been married to an African-American Muslima and was terribly unhappy. She was unhappy for material reasons. I was unhappy because she was unhappy and had to deal with this. I'm supposed to turn around and marry a white woman when I'm not really attracted to them, and right after she's had this infant baby by another man who's bouncing on her? Are you kidding me? And I'm supposed to do this to help me with my racism. If I was a racist, it would be correct, because it would be reactionary racism. I wish I could be racist and have power over them. There'd be no more white supremacy on this planet. You see, when I was introduced to my ex in North Africa, I was a single dad for all practical purposes. My American ex and I were still legally married, but we were never going to live together again. And my kids did live in another country, but I was, for all practical purposes, a single dad. And she was a widow whose husband died in a work accident, having nothing to do with nigger business or drug deals going bad. He was a good guy. He had a work-related accident. He didn't survive it. She was a widow. Now she got these kids. I already had kids, and I wasn't looking for any more. So I had told him that I was okay with a widow because of my own situation. I was really just complaining to him because these Gulf Arabs where I live didn't even want me to know about their female relatives that were taking an interest in me, even when these female relatives were widows. Especially if they were educated. They were trying to divert me with housemaids from third world countries, single moms who didn't speak English. And I was complaining to my friend about that, and he laughed about it, but then he came back and said, well, I found something that, and the situations were vastly different. But the thing was, he was able to tell me about her character and about how good it was. But many of you older guys in the Muslim community in the United States are not that considerate. I understand that it's getting harder and harder to find attractive black adult women who aren't someone else's baby mama, but I also understand that you're not addressing why that's getting hard. When you tell these women that the broke, short guy is going to treat them better than the tall, rich guy, they say, of course he will. He's short and broke. That's why. But you don't have the thinking process to start looking back at these overweight single mothers with the attitude, and just because they have a hijab on does not necessarily make them better in a practical sense. And you don't have the decency and the wherewithal and the mental faculties to turn and start saying to them, especially when they're not widows and they just have kids. Even more especially when they're not even divorcees, they just had kids without even wedlock. That they're carrying baggage too, and this means they have less options, which they already know but won't accept. Tell them, of course, you'll point to how well you treat a man. Of course, you're going to treat these men better than these young single women that have no kids because you're fat with other men's kids and you're older. And if it took this for you to be ready to treat a man better, then you didn't really learn your lesson in the first place, which means you're not really an adult, and I shouldn't have to look for a man for you anyway, because you got to grow up before I find a man for you. You're not saying this to these women. Instead, you're listening to them complain about their scenarios, and then you want to turn around and come tell these guys. The problem is that many of you went abroad and you started doing this, and now in some parts of Africa, these women think, well, they're not only thinking the same way as African American women. They're thinking along national lines. In other words, they're thinking, well, I can be a hoe now in this country because my aunt is married to an African American guy, and they'll take me when I'm used up. You've got this scenario going on. Now, this ain't every part of Africa, I understand it, but apparently in some parts that is exactly what the hell is happening. And it's to the point now where you may have married somebody from there, but now you can't bring her relatives who aren't used up to an African American man because they won't even tell you they're looking. But when they can't find a man over there in the nation that they're in because they're used up, or maybe just because they're widows, which is not their fault, but men just don't marry widows like that. Even in that case, in any case, you're only introducing African American men to the women from these nations that the men there would not marry. And that's not fair either. And it's not because they think that African American men are just naturally inferior. That's not why. It is simply because they're going to be the ones that are aggressive coming to you, because what you fail to realize is that when you married and you had no kids and no baggage, and you married a woman with some sort of baggage from a previous marriage or just a boyfriend, the message went out to her friends and family that American men will do this. So the women who are in these situations are going to be the ones that will come and approach you now, whereas the ones that are not would never get a chance because the smoke screen is the ones that would approach you. It's just like when you're fishing, but you're fishing in a pool where the big fish, they're not desperate, but the little fish are desperate. So you throw out the bait, but you're only catching the little fish that are more of a nuisance than they are nutrition. You can't catch the big ones. You just can't. That's exactly what's going on here. It's exactly this. These little fish, these guppies, or you could sit up and say these pigeons, they're flooding the bait. They're coming to you. And they're telling you, I'm looking for a husband. Find me a good one. And then you got the nerve to go back stateside and tell these young brothers, many times who are virgins, but in any case don't have baggage, that they should go travel across an ocean to marry a woman with baggage. Not stopping to think for a second that this was her goddamn game to begin with. She wasn't always somebody with baggage. She decided, I can do what the hell I want now. And when I got the consequences to deal with, he'll find me somebody from over there. Now, that's a long shot for her to think. It may not happen like that, but that's still how they're thinking. And you're falling victim to it. When instead what you should do is you should go back and you should tell these relatives what's going on. And it may be that you don't want to look at yourself and the choices you made. And that's why you don't say it. Maybe you don't tell them this because you don't want them to say, wait a minute. But you came over here with no baggage, no kids, and no any kind of baggage, and you married her and she got these kids. You're a hypocrite. You don't want them to say you're a hypocrite. But to that, I would say this. If you fear anyone looking at you and saying, well, see, you're a hypocrite, or you did the same thing, and shutting you up, instead of shutting you up, you say, yeah, and that was a mistake of mine, and I would not repeat that mistake again. But my aunt's been good to you. Yes, she has been good to me. I've got lucky. Or my sister, or my grandma, whatever the case, yeah, I got lucky. But I'm going to tell you now, back stateside, or you can simply say, yeah, she's been good to me. But I was able to find a good one. I can't sit up here and tell these other brothers that I was willing to do this on my own. That's another thing you can say. I myself was willing to do it, but I'm not going to tell other men to do this. I'm not going to tell other men to bring this much to the table in exchange for this little. I'm not allowed to tell you to bring so much to the table in exchange for so little from a man. Now, see, sisters have a habit of doing this when, they see the man they want and he's just so selective. Then they'll bring so much in exchange for so little, but even then they're bringing so little to the table in exchange for so much from other men. That's also partially because they can convince other men to do for them, give to them, and take nothing in exchange, especially in the way of romance or sex. Whatever she's in the market for, she still ain't doing it with them. So stop telling these, stop trying to push these single mothers abroad off on these young brothers, man. Now, if he's a single father, okay, fine, I get it. All right, like makes like. But see, what you're doing is the equivalent of, in the Christian community, telling these pastors that they should marry former porn stars because they're Christian, because they're good people. Well, she's a good person, she repented, and you believe in repentance, so you should marry her and wife her up. Okay, hold up. In order for that to work, the pastor has to leave the cloth, take a sabbatical from being a pastor, go into porn, film as many scenes as she has filmed with as many different partners, then come back and say to her, okay, I can become a pastor again. I've repented now. Now we're on equal footing. We can get married. See, nobody would agree to a pastor doing this in order to be on equal footing with the woman that people would come along and tell him he should marry. So if you're going to sit up and tell these young brothers they ain't got no baggage, and usually are virgins, ain't been inside of no vagina, to wife up these women that got other men's kids, and take those kids too, and take responsibility for them. The problem's not the kids. They're innocent. I understand that. But the problem is, what you have to do is you got to tell these brothers the truth. Hey, look, young brother, in order for you to be on equal footing with her, you're going to have to go out there and make babies with somebody else. That's what you got to do. As many babies as she has made. And if she's got multiple baby daddies, then he has to go out there and make babies with multiple mothers. Then come back to her and say, okay, you know what? Now we're on equal footing. You would not approve of him doing this. So if you would not approve of him doing this, then stop telling him to marry someone that did. You older guys, you know the game to a certain extent. Now, if you don't know the game, you don't know. Just admit you don't know, so you'll sit this one out. But if you know the game, then you need to go ahead and tell these cats what it is. And if you're afraid that your wife's going to say something about it, you tell her, you hold your hand and you say, hold the roll, slow your roll. Slow your roll. Just because you didn't play the game doesn't mean someone else isn't going to, and I don't need to tell him about this. And you don't tell me to be dishonest or to hide valuable information from other men about something. Now, I didn't blame you for anything you didn't do, and if you didn't play these games on me, I've treated you well because of it, but you don't tell me not to warn some other man about what's out there. Because if you do that, then that means that even if you're innocent, you're trying to defend the guilty, and that's not acceptable either, because then you'll become guilty. And that's true. When the innocent decide to step forward and defend the guilty to the extent that the guilty can keep on doing the stuff, being guilty, then the innocent will become guilty because they'll see the guilty get away with it. I mean, if I'm up here just defending bank robbers all the time, especially if I know they robbed the bank, and I'm like, it wasn't them, it wasn't them, it wasn't them. They ain't do nothing, it wasn't them. Oh, he ain't robbed that bank. Or even worse yet, I sit up and say, well, you know what, that was actually his money. If I'm sitting up defending them like that, knowing that they robbed the bank and it was someone else's money, believe you me, if I do that, And I keep seeing them get away with it, and it always works, and people are willing to at least listen, I may turn around and rob a bank one day. Or at the very least, I might go to them and say, hey, man, look, I defended you. I got them off your back. But can I get some percentage of that you got? Then my fortune begins to depend on them getting away with their guilt. And that's exactly what you are aiding and abetting, whether you know it or not, when you're telling these sisters these sisters abroad, well, you may not be able to find a man here because of X, Y, and Z, but I can find you a man in America, because we're not like that. No, we need to be more like the guy over there. Don't come to me with baggage that I'm not bringing. That's what we need to be like. And that's exactly why it is that I tend to agree with O'Shea in his prediction. He predicted that in 2020, a lot of black wives are going to wind up divorced. And fewer and fewer of them are even going to find a man to marry in the first place. And more black men are going to be with wives from elsewhere, black or otherwise, but wives from outside, not just the U.S., but outside of the West. I tend to agree with him. I tend to agree because, 2019, I did it. We met in 2017, but we tied the knot 2019. And so, and I've been treated quite well. I rarely have to raise my voice. I got to correct about a few things, and she may have to correct me about some of these things too. But I don't have to raise my voice. And sometimes I've even had to say, hold up. Now, I know that this is a game that some of these ladies play. Don't come back to me and tell me, but men do. I've had to tell her this before. Don't tell me what men do, because I already know what men do. I also know that there are men who do it, men who don't. I know that men come all over the spectrum. Men don't know all the games that these ladies play. So don't try to divert my attention away. I've had to tell her this, and you know what? She stopped. She listened. There are times I say something she didn't pay attention. I've called her on it. Did you just ask me a question and not pay attention to the answer? Oh, I'm sorry, my bad. Okay, all right. That's what I thought. I've only 2 times had to say to her, when I tell you to do something, you do it. It's for your own good anyway. And I'm paying the cost, so I'm the boss. I've only had to say that twice in half a year. And she was nice about it both times. Thanks for the reminder. So I didn't have to be mean and raise my voice and thump my chest and put on a display. I didn't have to do none of that. I never even had to say, yeah, that's what I thought. I don't even have to talk like that to her. Other brothers, they're not that lucky. And they ain't always, and sometimes they're not that lucky when they married a black woman from another Western country, or when they married a black woman from certain parts of West Africa. Not all over, but some parts. Yeah, they found the same thing happening to them. They tied the knot, and guess what? She got all this attitude. She's all over the place. Even from some of them back home, but you still better pay the cost to be the boss. And the thing is, there was a survey that showed that of all nationalities, the women from Nigeria were the most promiscuous. And what I'm usually hearing about is that the complaints come regarding Nigerian women. Now, I'm inclined to believe it because I know how the men and the women get down when they come from the South. I know in the North it's also very different. I realize that. I can tell you now, in Liberia, the Liberians themselves will tell you, you get a city girl and she's going to act a damn fool. You go into the interior, or what they call the hinterlands, and get a country girl, and she acts a lot better. And that's true. I've seen that. The ones that grew up in the country and then came to the city as adults were usually the best behaved ones when I met them in Atlanta years ago. The ones that grew up in Monrovia, or the ones who had simply been in the United States too long. Oh, no kind of couth, cheating on their husbands and all that. Oh yeah, we're talking Liberia now. We're talking about West Africa. There was that, but that wasn't the whole entire country. And see, I don't want the continent to become a bad place for good men to go, to find good wives. I'm not looking for that. But what I'm seeing is that a lot of this is not coming about because of just television, but I'm seeing that some of this is coming about also because there are American Muslim or African American Muslim men going over there. And when they find someone, okay, fine, but then they turn around and they're just like, well, these women that these local men don't want, I'll find for you somebody from my country. Thinking that they're showing how magnanimous they are, when in fact the message that is being sent is, I'll just take I'll take the consequences of my irresponsibility to America. All it takes is for one of them to find an American man, African American man, and the relatives start thinking they can do this, depending on what she brought to the table or didn't bring and what she got in exchange. They're learning from each other. That's what I'm getting at. So I think you old cats, y'all need to go ahead and wise up. I mean, this might be one time where you older fellas need to listen to some of these younger guys and get put up on game. Or if you don't want to listen to someone younger, then you're a hypocrite anyway because you can't stand to listen to someone younger. But you could listen to someone like BGS. You could listen to him and he'll put you up on game if you don't already know. And why brothers shouldn't listen to you when you try to match them up with single mothers from these third world countries. No. No, indeed. And they may be more submissive. They may be more appreciative of what's done for them. They may not. But that's a gamble right now. And I never tell people to gamble. So that being said, I hope that what I've said one day will no longer be true. In the meantime, I hope that what I've said is a benefit. Black heart, sign and black out. Assalamu alaikum.